Welcome to Shadow Fable. Don't forget to subscribe. Akiko's hands trembled as she pulled the dusty videotape from the cluttered shelves of an abandoned video store on a rain-soaked Tokyo side street. The neon reflections melted onto cracked pavement, while the hum of distant traffic blended with a soft drizzle that turned the night into a palette of silver and ink. It was 1987. A time when technology was both a promise and a threat. And in that dim, flickering light, the tape's worn label, Your Tomorrow, beckoned her like a forbidden secret. The discovery seemed too deliberate, yet no one recalled the store ever carrying such a tape. Inside her cramped apartment above a noodle shop, the air already thick with lingering cigarette smoke and the damp residue of summer's heat, Akiko slid the tape into her battered VCR. The static flickered on her small television screen, bursting into images that defied simple explanation. In the opening scene, an indistinct figure moved along a rain-slicked street, a scene eerily similar to the very street outside her window moments before. Akiko felt an unsettling chill crawl up her spine as the scene shifted to focus on a lone figure whose face was obscured by shadow, walking toward an unknown destination. The tape didn't merely capture images, it forecasted actions. At first, it began innocuously. A mugging on a busy street corner, the clink of discarded coins on wet pavement, small, unremarkable moments that one could chalk up to urban life's randomness. But as the narrative within the tape progressed, the scenes began to disturb Akiko more than any film before. Each playback revealed details of her own life with uncanny precision. The flickering neon sign across the street, the specific hum of the city at midnight, and even subtle peculiarities in her routine that she had not noticed. An errant phone call, a fleeting shadow through her window. By the third viewing, the tape predicted a violent confrontation. The image of a man, his eyes hollow, his approach calculated, was superimposed over her apartment's layout, as if plotting an imminent invasion. The scene was set with masterful, almost hypnotic tension. Rain pounding on rooftops, the slow ascension of mist, and a persistent, insidious whisper of wind against glass. Akiko's heart pounded like a metronome tuned to fear. With each subsequent viewing, the violent details intensified. A shattered mirror reflecting her haunted eyes, the relentless countdown of a clock echoing in empty corridors of time, and a palpable sense of inevitability that blurred the lines between prediction and premonition. At work, in a modest, cluttered editing suite in a part of the city known for its artistic decay, Akiko attempted to piece together the connection between the tape and her own unraveling life. Her colleagues were an eclectic mix of cynics and dreamers, each clinging to modern mythologies and conspiracies that festered in the underbelly of the metropolis. There was Kenji, an obsessive archivist with a mind that clung to every unsolved mystery and true crime case that gripped society, and Yumi, a quiet but volatile assistant whose interest in obscure psychological disorders bordered on the academic and the pathological. To them, Akiko's growing fixation was both an enigma and a mirror reflecting their own hidden anxieties. Late one rainy evening, after the expected mundane passage of time gave way to a rare moment of quiet in the editing suite, Kenji approached her over the hum of outdated computers and the persistent dribbling of rain outside their makeshift window. "Akiko," he said in a tone that blended concern and excitement, "have you ever considered that this tape isn't just predicting a series of unfortunate events? What if it's manipulating reality? I've seen records of similar phenomena, cases where seemingly random footage led to tragedies that bore an unsettling resemblance to the tape's narrative." Akiko's eyes, darkened by weeks of sleepless nights and obsession, met his with guarded desperation. She had scoured newspaper archives and obscure forums, reading about local legends, and documented conspiracies that bordered on the surreal. Every piece of evidence pointed to something far more insidious than chance, a system of control, a psychological experiment, or perhaps the meddling of a clandestine cult whose roots lay in shadowy corners of Tokyo's history. Yet every new lead only deepened the labyrinth of questions with no clear answers. Determined to pierce the veil of uncertainty, Akiko embarked on a solitary investigation. She traced the tape's origins to a defunct broadcast station on the outskirts of the city, now a crumbling relic of Japan's frenetic post-war rebuilding. Inside, the peeling walls and cold, indifferent concrete hallways bore silent testimony to decades of forgotten broadcasts. Amid dusty records and abandoned microphones, she found a discarded journal. Its pages, filled with meticulous sketches of city scenes and annotations in a trembling hand, spoke of experiments in predictive media, a desperate attempt to capture the ineffable interplay of human behavior and time. The cryptic entries hinted at an ill-fated project involving subliminal imagery meant to nudge viewers toward preordained outcomes. The revelation struck Akiko with both dread and urgency. Each word in the journal dripped with the intensity of contrived determinism. The project's creator had believed that through carefully designed imagery, one could implant ideas deep into the human psyche, effectively rewriting future actions. If this was indeed the genesis of your tomorrow, the implications were horrifying. Not only was the tape an artifact of prophecy, but it was also a tool, a weapon forged in the crucible of manipulation, intended to steer lives toward a predetermined, often catastrophic fate. Every night, Akiko played the tape again, compulsively analyzing each frame, each fragment of sound. The dark alleys, the rain-soaked streets, the distorted reflections. It was as if the tape was alive, feeding on her terror and molding itself to the contours of her inner turmoil. One evening, during a particularly stormy night, the tape showed something new. In a brief, glitched sequence, a face emerged, pale and emotionless, with eyes that seemed to pierce through the shallow veneer of her reality. In that instant, a part of her mind whispered that the face was a mirror of her own hidden guilt, her repressed memories of a past she had long tried to bury. The next day, an anonymous call shattered the fragile sanctuary of routine. A distorted voice, layered with static, whispered a single sentence: "Stop watching before your future evaporates." It was as if the tape had awakened a malevolent guardian, or worse, an echo of the subconscious forces at work. Akiko's resolve hardened. She knew she stood at a crossroads where the line between observer and participant had blurred irreparably. Haunted by both the tape and the journal's macabre revelations, Akiko sought solace at the bustling precinct of a popular Tokyo cafe, a haven for those seeking distractions from inner demons. Over coffee, laced with bitter despair, she met a man named Satoshi, whose own history was marred by inexplicable tragedies and unsolved mysteries. Satoshi's eyes, heavy with unsaid words, betrayed a man who had once delved into the dark corners of conspiracies, only to find that every discovery led to further entrapment. "Perhaps you're looking at the wrong end of the lens," Satoshi murmured, his words merging with the soft clinking of porcelain. "Sometimes the tape isn't a predictor, it's a mirror." His voice, low and resigned, hinted at an understanding of predestined outcomes born from collective human error, a spiraling descent into inevitable sorrow catalyzed by fear itself. As the days bled into each other, Akiko found her world curdling into a perpetual twilight of suspicion and dread. The tape's predictions increasingly intertwined with her daily existence. On one dismal afternoon, while waiting for a delivery on her doorstep, she noticed a crumpled envelope on the worn doormat. Inside was a Polaroid snapshot of her apartment, a grainy, candid image taken from outside, as if someone had observed her life with ruthless precision. The chill of its implications seared her skin. Each new piece of evidence, anonymous notes, furtive glances on street corners, inexplicable coincidences, wove a narrative of surveillance, casting her as the unwilling subject of an unseen experiment. Her nights became a relentless alternation of sleep and gnawing insomnia. In the dark, she reenacted the tape's scenes in her mind, scrutinizing every nuance, every shadow playing across familiar walls. The distinction between prediction and paranoia dissolved into a haze of anxiety. Was the tape influencing her actions, or was it merely reflecting the chaos of her tortured psyche? With each passing moment, the urgency to defy fate battled with the crushing realization that she was, perhaps, doomed to be both puppet and puppet master in a demented cycle. In a final, desperate bid to reclaim control, Akiko devised a plan to confront the source of the terror, a direct challenge to the mechanism seemingly dictating her fate. She meticulously planned a night to broadcast her own defiant message over the city's archaic radio frequencies. Hiding her plan among layers of coded messages and artistic subterfuge in her film projects, she intended to expose the sinister origins of the tape. Yet, even as she orchestrated her rebellion, guilt gnawed at her. The possibility loomed that any intervention might not only disrupt an external force, but also fracture the delicate balance of her own shattered mind. The night of the broadcast was a storm of both literal and metaphorical proportions. Akiko set up in her apartment, which now resembled a war room lit by the glow of multiple screens, each flickering with the ominous static and captured images of rain-drenched Tokyo. As the clock inched toward midnight, she tapped a sequence on an antiquated keyboard, sending encrypted signals into the ether. Her voice, laden with both defiance and despair, filled the cramped space as she read out fragments of the journal, exposing the hidden project that had birthed the tape. Half protest, half confession, all sinking into the void of collective fear. Outside, the city seemed to hold its breath. The rain intensified, hammering the concrete with the relentless persistence of fate. In that charged silence, Akiko felt the weight of both her past and potential future. The tape's ghostly images surged in her mind, a relentless montage of cruelty and intimacy. Her pulse thundered as she recognized a truth that was as clear as it was incomprehensible. She had been complicit in her own unraveling, feeding a narrative born from her deepest insecurities. When the broadcast ended, a weary calm settled over the apartment. The storm outside subsided, leaving behind broken reflections in puddles and an eerie stillness that belied the tumult inside Akiko's mind. For a moment, she dared to hope that the scream into the void had shattered the cycle, that by acknowledging her complicity she could wrest control away from the deterministic grip of the tape. But that hope was as fleeting as the static on her screen. In the days that followed, the evidence of her broadcast spread like a contaminant through Tokyo's underground media channels. Yet nothing changed. Instead, subtle shifts occurred in her daily life. Unbidden gestures of fate that suggested the tape was not an external force, but a manifestation of her own subconscious labyrinth. A neighbor, once a benign passerby, gave her a long, mournful look that hinted at shared regret. A street vendor whispered apologetically about a lost promise, every word a cryptic reminder of unforeseen consequences. The line between orchestrated fate and relentless paranoia had been forever erased. Haunted by the realization that the tape's predictions might simply be a mirror of her inner darkness, Akiko's journey had transformed into a confrontation with her own identity. In a final, desperate act of liberation, she gathered the tape, the journal, and every piece of correspondence that had landed at her door like grim postmarks of destiny. With trembling resolve, she returned to the deserted broadcast station. Under a waning moon, amidst the ruins of recorded histories and whispered secrets, she set the tape ablaze in a small, forlorn ceremony of defiance. The flames danced and sizzled, casting grotesque shadows on the walls as the night swallowed the sound of crackling paper. As the fire consumed the tape, its predicted images dissolved into drifting embers, leaving behind an ambiguous silence. In that burning moment, Akiko found a bittersweet catharsis, a transient belief that the power to define her future was not solely embedded in a cursed tape, but within her own fractured, fiercely human heart. Yet, even as the flames died down, a lingering question persisted in the rain-soaked darkness. Had she exercised a malevolent force, or merely defied the relentless echo of her own guilt and despair? Tokyo resumed its eternal rhythm. Neon lights glittered across rain-drenched streets, indifferent to the inner battles of its inhabitants. Akiko, forever changed, roamed those avenues with a wary resolve, a silent acknowledgement that in a world governed by hidden forces and subtle manipulations, every step was both a choice and an inevitability. In that uneasy twilight where truth merged with performance and rebellion danced with resignation, the city itself whispered a grim reminder. The line between destiny and self-destruction is as thin and fragile as a reel of film spinning in a forgotten machine. And somewhere, amid the city's undying hum, the memory of your tomorrow lingered, a spectral warning etched into the fabric of time, an ever-present question of whether we are the authors of our fate or just unwitting actors in a predestined performance.